Well, good morning, everybody. Yesterday, as we focused so much on, what's now Tropical Storm Helene, soon to be Hurricane Helene, I kind of missed out on a couple of other big features rolling across the country, and I apologize for that. I want to show you this satellite animation just to kind of get back to what happened yesterday outside of watching Helene, which is the northern edge of the cloud shield is right here. We were keeping a close eye on this trough, right? This one that was digging in. This is going to be absolutely critical to where Helene ends up in the Mid-South. Well, as that trough dug in, sorry, I just got a new satellite image in there. There we go. As that trough dug in, out ahead of it, we had a large area of deeper convection that moved through parts of the Tennessee and Ohio Valley. We also had some bigger storms that were in parts of the Carolinas that I just kind of brushed over. I didn't even show you the storm outlooks from the Storm Prediction Center. We even had some deeper convection that was down here in Texas, and you can take a look here in the Northwest. There was quite a bit of wildfire smoke from some new fires that just showed up. Just to get an eye on these storms, just take a look at the satellite data from yesterday afternoon and evening as the sun was approaching. Setting here, we can see that some of these storm clusters here producing some very well-defined anvils, some deep overshooting tops, and locally they produce some heavy rain and straight line wind damage. If you go down into the southern plains, take a look at the supercell that blew up right here in central Oklahoma near Norman. That one was quite impressive. Saw several folks out there chasing it. The wind shear profile was quite interesting because the boundary was here. The upper level wind was coming out of this direction, so it sheared the top of this off toward the south. A lot of times you think about an Oklahoma supercell, we see the shearing going in that direction. So just kind of neat to look at the difference. Had bigger storms in central Texas as well. And if we just boil it all down, we had 170 reports of severe weather yesterday, including 4 tornadoes. And I just, again, apologize. I was so focused on the hurricane, I forgot that we were dealing with other things across the country. If you have a look at the last 48 hours of observed precipitation, some of these storms put down some heavy rains on some very dry areas. I'm thinking about over here in parts of this side of the Ohio River Valley, which have been so dry. Thinking about parts of Oklahoma and the Red River, which have missed out on recent precipitation kind of in a big way. And the slow-moving storm system that's been moving into parts of Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan here, and places over the last 2 days has delivered quite a bit of rainfall. I'm thinking about Champaign at 1.8 and St. Louis down here at over 2.2 inches of rainfall. Last couple things. Take a look out west. I mentioned there were some fires there. In addition to being able to see some of the jet contrail and the very high, thin cirrus here, it's kind of neat to be able to see that. You can see some of these larger fires that did show up in parts of Oregon and Idaho yesterday, and also some in Montana as well. So we just need to be keeping an eye on all these other pieces. But of course, the kind of main story right now is soon to be Hurricane Helene. It is currently a tropical storm. Wind speeds this morning were at 64 miles an hour. We are expecting this to become a major hurricane. And the mesoscale floater is putting this storm system right in the Yucatan Channel, which is, of course, between the Yucatan Peninsula and Cuba. And this is much more organized. And just something to think about. There's a lot of different ways to look and assess how organized, how well-developed, and how conducive the environment is to a tropical system. And one of the things I often look for are the waves. You see them here, way deep in the cirrus cloud shield that's over the top of this thing, kind of emanating away from the hurricane, expanding outward from it. Now, of course, in addition to that, we look for the deeper convection, the appearance of an eye, the lack of big kind of intrusions of dry air, which would be colors like this. And all of those things aren't really there on the negative side, and the things on the positive side are adding up to where we expect this system to become quite potent. I mentioned the dry air. I just wanted to show you a water vapor image. So whenever you look at this animation, this, of course, would be high water vapor content, and this would be low. Our nearby dry intrusions are here, coming over the Yucatan Peninsula, and here in parts of the, parts of the Gulf of Mexico. But we are anticipating Helene to go in this direction, and already we can see that we're moistening up that path going forward, meaning that we are not going to be running into a situation where this system is going to have to ingest a lot of dry air or even a lot of high wind shear to kind of slow it down. The highest wind shear values are way back here at the base of this trough. So I think what's critical to see here is that Helene is going to have a pretty clear path forward going toward the Big Bend in Florida. And that is where most of the models continue to project its path. So we see right now that the latest from the National Hurricane Center has this at 65 miles an hour. As soon as it gets up there, another about 10 miles an hour will become a hurricane. We are expecting that later today. In fact, not too much time from now. It's supposed to be up there around 80 mile an hour with its wind speed. 105 in 24 hours, 120 in 36 hours. And we're expecting landfall here at somewhere around Category 3, possibly into Category 4 status. Newest update from the National Hurricane Center did shift, just a bit east. This is not much in terms of the cone size, but it's certainly shifted to the track. A bit west. I'm so sorry. The track yesterday was about here, and now it's here, the center of the track. So instead of taking this much farther into Georgia before it makes this turn around, we now see this is kind of going over parts of western Georgia, maybe like over Moultrie, then heading up here into this part of central Tennessee, the remnants of this. And then now, instead of carrying it much farther into Indiana and Illinois, the newest forecasts are centering it right over here over western Kentucky and Tennessee. So this is the latest, and there's no way I can make an argument against the National Hurricane Center. Their expertise is far superior to mine in putting this together. But what we can do is add to this. We can look for other sources of evidence. And so that's why we go to the super blend of models. We just kind of pull out their collective tracks, which again is now just a hair farther to the west than yesterday. So this will be important for taking more of Tampa out of the greatest risk of storm surge. But this will also be important for heavier precipitation amounts farther to the west in the Panhandle into Alabama and, of course, into Georgia. So we're going to have to watch this very carefully. But take a look at the latest. See it coming right there through northern Georgia, eastern Tennessee, central Kentucky, and then turns right around and spend some time here as it gets pulled into that upper level trough we've been spending so much time discussing, producing that Fujiwara effect we detailed yesterday in yesterday's forecast video. All right, so knowing that this is kind of the latest we've got on the potential path and thinking through the strength of this hurricane, maybe it would be worthwhile to do a couple of other things real quick. Let's go back to, again, I get this stuff from a student. He's a PhD student out of Oklahoma University. His name is Tomer Berg. He produces this website. I think it's absolutely fantastic. Apparently, a lot of people are hitting his site because I am not able to directly connect to it right now. We were at least able to pull up some of these plots, but I wanted to show you some intensity plots, but I'll be honest with you, it's very much in line with what the National Hurricane Center is suggesting here. So maybe while his site reloads, I apologize there that it didn't pop up right away, but it's arctic.som.ou.edu/tburg, TBURG/products. Go check that out. It's a fantastic resource and website. Let's come back, though, to the kind of narrative here and talk through storm surge. Again, with the shift a bit farther to the west, we now see they've kind of pulled back on the greatest extent of where that 10 to 15 feet of storm surge could be. We now see that we're still somewhere in the 5 to 8 feet around Tampa Bay, but I was concerned yesterday that this was going to be up around that 6 to 10 feet, and they certainly kind of left it in that range, which makes a lot of sense if the track of the system has changed a little bit. If we want to think through the winds, let's do this a couple of different ways because this is not the only wind system in town. As I play this forward, let's just get all the way out there through this weekend, this Saturday into Sunday. And as we get into early Monday morning, take note, we've got some strong winds earlier in the Columbia Basin, then a lot coming out here in the western and northern plains, and then into the Canadian Prairie, very strong winds. So in addition to the hurricane force winds, which we are expecting to get pretty far into Georgia, you've kind of got this view overall. I'm going to open this up in a new tab, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit here so we can see a couple of things. Just to have a look at the strength of the winds here. We're going to look at the GFS as well, but I do want to come in and use the high-res European model to get a look at its forecast of wind gusts. So we've gone off my color bar, which stops at 102. So right along the shore, this would be very, the European model. Again, we don't use it as our best benchmark on winds, but we do see that it's got somewhere over 100 mile an hour cumulative gusts here. I expect it to be stronger than that, but it's also carrying hurricane force winds here into this part of Georgia as well. Our narrative has not changed. This is still going to be producing the greatest flood threat with these winds coming up against the Smokies, the Blue Ridge Mountains, this part of the Appalachian Mountains, and then right into this part of northern Georgia into Tennessee. So that I don't have a whole lot of change for you in my forecast from that yesterday. I will note that the model did increase wind speeds in parts of Kentucky, Indiana, and Illinois. We now see the cumulative gusts up here eclipsing 40 miles an hour. And if we look at the GFS solution of this, let's play this one forward. I think the GFS maybe just captures this a little bit better. This is through early Monday morning. Let's go ahead and open this in a new tab so we can zoom around a bit here. And again, we can now see maybe those stronger winds expected earlier. We got a wind advisory out right now for the Columbia Basin, the Canadian Prairie, very strong winds. Here in the Northern Plains, gusts up to 40. But if we just kind of get a closer look at what's expected, notice that hurricane force winds are being carried pretty far into Georgia. Strong, very strong winds here where Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia come together. And you can now see a broader area where the gusts could get up there, in the mid 40s in terms of speed. So we need to stay aware of the potential of this system. And all of this is captured every day in the all hazards weather map. So nearly all of Florida, save this part of the panhandle, is under a tropical storm warning. I know that the color shading is very subtle, but right in through here, this is where we have our hurricane warnings. We have wind advisories behind that and a large area of flood watch that's already been posted, and we expect that to continue to grow and move farther around the track of this system as it evolves later on this week. We have some areas of fog. We have an excessive heat warning that's out for parts of the southwest. And here's the wind event that I was mentioning here in the Columbia Basin, getting into northern parts of Idaho and the Rocky Mountains of Montana. All right. Given that that's kind of our setup and we've done our quick trip through looking at some of the forecasts of the hurricane, let's now dig into a couple of the other aspects of it. Across the top, and again, this is just at agweather.com, I just clicked on SPC Convective Outlooks, which is here, and it takes you to this part of the page. Today, tomorrow, and the next day, looking at severe weather threat. And so the big concern is going to be on day 2. This would be tomorrow, okay, on the 26th. We're going to be concerned about the risk of probably embedded tornadoes in the circulation here in this part of Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina. Remember, as this hurricane comes through, it's always going to be on the kind of divided up into quadrants. So let's just draw a hurricane here and divide it into 4 quadrants. It's always this quadrant, the upper right quadrant, that has the best wind shear profile for producing smaller circulations within the hurricane that are tornadic. And so we need to be aware of that risk in this part of Georgia and in South Carolina. If we come back here, though, we see that'll move up to North Carolina, Virginia by the time we get out there to day 3. On the excessive rainfall outlook, you can see the next 3 days. Let's kind of zoom in here. They've already issued a high risk where we've been kind of focusing on right up against the Blue Ridge and the Smokies here. So this will be elevation enhanced precipitation, and that is my biggest concern for where I think the greatest flooding out of this is going to be outside of where it makes landfall down here in Florida. Okay, so let's get all of this wrapped up into some model forecasts. We're going to start off with the high-res NAM, picking up on this morning's precip. So we do know of a couple things. Let's get a refresh on that. There we go. We are watching carefully the frontal boundary out ahead of this, again, producing heavy rain by this evening in an area that we are expecting the hurricane to also put down extremely heavy rain. There's rain moving through the northeast. We have a frontal boundary that's sweeping through the northwest. This is a part of the wind system that we're concerned about in the Columbia Basin here toward northern parts of Idaho and Montana. So what's going on here is that the hurricane has actually got a large area of moisture out ahead of it that's going to be increasing the flood threat. This is Thursday at 1 a.m. The high-res NAM, which we don't often use, I've said that many times, as our main hurricane model, but we're going to look at it. It's got landfall right here somewhere around 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock Eastern time on Thursday evening. But it's the rain out ahead of this that's going to be a major concern, just given how much this is going to moisten things up before the main circulation gets in place and then produces, its flooding effects. Take note, we have a system leaving the northeast. This again is tomorrow night on Thursday night. We're still watching for precipitation here in parts of Washington out of this. Let's keep playing this forward, though. We see that the high-res NAM takes us through western parts of Georgia and rolls it straight here toward, this is right where I-75 or I-24, I forget what it is, comes right into parts of, Tennessee into Georgia. That's that main thoroughfare to get down to Atlanta. And widespread rain's being spread out ahead of this. Now, what'll be very tricky is there's going to be a very hard break somewhere there that you get north of that, there won't be a single drop of rainfall out of this. South of it, it's just the amounts are going to build very, very quickly. So let's get a look at what some of these forecasts are. And I'm going to do this like I did yesterday. This is the latest WPC forecast. Okay, so the Weather Prediction Center, it's a part of NOAA. We've now seen the country. We see the moisture that's coming into eastern Canada and the northeast, the frontal boundary in the northwest. Let's focus now down into the southeast. Let's get down there and just get a look at some of these precip totals. The WPC has now put down widespread 6 to 12 inches of rain in this corridor, all enhanced by the mountains. 6 to 12. It's got into the Mid-South. It's increased the amounts over here, kind of where Kentucky, Tennessee, Missouri, and Arkansas come together. We're now looking at rainfall amounts pretty widespread in the 2 to 4 inch range. Yesterday, this had dropped considerably. Let's go to another model. This is the national blend of models. You got your national view here. Let's get in there and just check out the southeast. Very similar overall to the WPC. I want to go now to the European Artificial Intelligence. There's the national view. Let's get into the southeast. That is our main flood threat area. Let's next go to the European HRES, the High Resolution European. Let's zoom in on the southeast because we've got a pretty good picture of the rest of the country. Very similar. Also increased rainfall totals here. And let's go to the ensemble. There's the national view, southeast. I think it's good to compare, and I don't see a lot of differences, and that's what's important. Model consistency between modeling platforms is a good indicator of the greater risks. And here's the GFS, southeast. I'd say the only differences that I'm noticing in the GFS is in this area. Some of the other models filled this in with quite a bit more precip here, northern Mississippi, parts of southeastern Tennessee, but they have all increased rainfall amounts here. And notice this, the GFS is much shallower. Let me go look at this. Yeah, we can see the European ensemble. Oops, sorry. This is artificial intelligence. There we go. I guess it's similar. There's that hard line. Man, right in through there. That's going to be a difficult one. Let's go now to the GFS ensemble. Leave it at the national view, but very similar overall. For some probabilities, this is what I've got for the chance of an inch. No surprises here, but I just want you to note how wet it is in the northeast. Step it up to 2 inches and up to 4 and up to 8. And now you can see there are some places in here where the European ensembles at a better than 80% chance of 8 inches. Now, I haven't mentioned much about the drier areas, but they're quite expansive. This is who's going to be under a ½ inch for the next 10 days. And this is under 1/10 of an inch. And we have to redirect our focus back to the issues going on in these very, very dry areas. I want to show you why, and then I'm going to show you what the forecast looks like. So here's the why. As we play forward with the upper level high pattern, let's get a refresh on that. We see the Fujiwara effect we've been talking so much about right here. That low is cut off. It sits and spins through Saturday right over the Mid-South until this little wave right there tries to pull it. And the newest update is this wave's a bit farther to the north, which means we're going to pull this over toward the Ohio River Valley before it exits into the northeast. So there it goes. We do have another system entering the Pacific Northwest in British Columbia, which is kind of our new trajectory, right? We said a lot of the lows coming out of the Bering Sea are going to be coming into British Columbia rather than digging into Oregon and California. And we see this is next Wednesday and Thursday. And I'm going to tell you, there's some drier air coming in with this frontal boundary that'll be ahead of this. But overall, we do not see kind of the right ingredients to open the Gulf back up again, bring in a lot of precipitation, and there's more ridging in this area than anything else through the next couple of weeks. And that's why the week 2 forecast looks so dry. So here's the CPC, European Ensemble, European Artificial Intelligence, and GFS. They all have a much, much more similar, consistent forecast than before. And we see a broader area going out there into week 2, October 3rd, October 9, looking relatively dry. Now, with all of that, we need to think about where we've been. So I mentioned, okay, we're going to definitely fill this in, and we're going to get some better rains that are going to come through parts of Indiana and Ohio, and we're going to fill in that hole. But this one's going to get bigger. We're going to see issues here. We did bring in a little bit of rain yesterday into parts of Oklahoma, but this northern plains issue, this western Corn Belt dryness, Well, we know that over the last, since the beginning of this month, we've got some reporting districts. Look at this one in central Minnesota, driest September on record so far. And, our records go back to 1893, but we're looking here over that time period, driest since 1893. And the issue here, and this is also carried into Michigan and into the Northeast, but the issue here is that the soil moisture levels have dropped so much after having all of this being flooded out earlier in the year. Just take a look at these soil moisture levels down at 40 centimeters, about 16 inches. Extremely, extremely low in the Missouri Basin, the Mississippi Basin, and parts of the Ohio Basin. So that's the concern over the fact that all of our moisture is really just coming in with the hurricane, doing something like this, and missing so much of this area with ridging that follows. Now, the forecast pattern with that ridging could include some frost risk. It's interesting. It's open and it's moving. You notice it wasn't blocked. There was no high or lows or anything like that when I showed you the forecast of the heights. So I've got some colder air. This is about a week from now coming into northern Montana. And I want to show you something with these temperatures here in a few moments after we look at the daily highs. Here's today's high temperatures. This is why we've got the excessive heat warnings out. Very hot into Montana. As we talked about getting into Thursday, deep into the 90s here after a frost event got into the western Dakotas last weekend. And if we just play this forward into Friday and Saturday, this is all cloud cover dominated here. That's why it's cooler. Getting into Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. That little bit right there, Monday night into Tuesday morning is what's going to drop these temperatures off into Montana. But there's something interesting happening after October the 1st, and I'm going to show it to you in a dew point map. So this is not a temperature map. This is a dew point temperature map. These numbers represent moisture more than anything. As we play this forward, we're going to go through the next couple of days relatively quickly. I want to get you out there to Sunday, Monday. There we are. Now notice on Monday how low the dew point temperatures are here. This is a tongue of very, very dry air early next week on Monday into Tuesday. Now see this on Monday night. As this low curls up here, there's going to be a frontal boundary with much, much drier air on the back side of it. Look at this. We have dew point temperatures down in the mid-20s. That's going to come through. So again, this is just showing us the drier air. And this is the time frame, early in the morning on the 1st, early in the morning on the 2nd, where we've got the dry air, the cooler air, we've got the front pass through, the higher pressure built in. And that's just that time frame I'm worried about getting these temperatures down pretty cold. And you can just see there's a big push at some drier air that's coming in here. It's kind of interesting. Do you note how we can see the influence of the river? That's cool in the dew point temperature. Okay, so that would be October 2nd and October 3rd. We still see that dry air pushing. In fact, there's another push of it on October 4th and 5th. So much drier air coming into this area very soon. So I'm going to be looking now at the probability or the chance at being under 40 degrees Fahrenheit starting off early in the morning on the 1st. So this is where we have our cold, dry air coming in. Let's get out there to the 2nd, which is here. This is where we could have some frost risk on the 2nd. We get out there to the 3rd, again, possibly in this area, and then on out to the 4th. I'll be watching New England at that point. So I just want you to see that there's some cooler air coming in that first week of October. We can see it when we see our forecast models for day 5 through 10. See this right in through here? It doesn't look like much, but that is the intrusion of some of that cooler air. But most of the next 5 days, very, very warm unless you're under the influence of the tropical system doing this. Day 5 through 10 and day 10 through 15. This is the newest look at October 5th to October 10th. And overall, we don't have a blocked pattern that's high enough amplitude for me to have major concern on where this temperature pattern could be taking us toward a bigger frost event. So from here, I just want to finish up with South America. I'm not going to do any long range today. I'm still building ideas. I've just had a lot of focus on the hurricane, and it's distracted me from forecasting the longer range. So let's look out here at the newest high-res European model, 10-day out, compare it to the 10-day GFS. And what's interesting is that we are starting to see something in the Amazon, something getting into Mato Grosso, some precipitation rather than just being completely white, indicating no precipitation. There's some. Our flooding problem down here in Rio Grande do Sul, parts of Argentina, Paraguay, Uruguay continues. But I want to show you this. The GFS, which is not known for being overly wet for the onset of the monsoon, this is its 10-day forecast, but this is its 15-day forecast. And it's actually trying to initiate something in this corridor day 10 through 15. Now that's got to be careful with this. I'm not saying this is going to happen. This is just a model. We are actually, told students for 15 years, never show a 15-day forecast from the GFS, and I just did. So if any of you are watching, feel free to send me a nasty email. But I'm trying to just look for indications that the monsoon has some sort of life to it and could get going. And the GFS is trying to just put down storms. It's trying to do it. But again, the next 10 days, nothing. So this is well into, the second week of October that we're talking about here. So I do want to just point out again, the newest update for October from the European model. It's not as dry as it was yesterday here. Much more normal precipitation pattern. I just think that we have to get through the front half of October, which could be a little drier, and then I think the monsoon gets going after that. So that'll be very important for planting progress down there right now, which in its early stages is behind. Okay, that's all I'm going to cover today. I hope you all have a good rest of your day, and we'll just talk again on Thursday morning. Thanks.